Woke Hollywood getting killed after streaming ruined the studios. Coming from Forbes, why streaming could be Hollywood's final act. The future of Hollywood changed forever in August 1997. Far from the glitz and glamour of Tinseltown, two tech entrepreneurs sat in a cafe at the small California city of Santa Cruz and came up with an idea for a subscription-based mail-order DVD sale and rental business. It went on to become the world's most valuable media company. That's Netflix. On the face of it, selling and renting DVDs was far from revolutionary. However, that wasn't any old rental firm. It was Netflix, and its co-founders Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph had a game-changing trick up their sleeves. In short, Netflix customers didn't need to return the DVDs they rented. The catch was that until they did so, they couldn't rent any more, and in the meantime, the business collected their monthly subscription fees without needing to pay any postage. And there was no postage because there were no new DVDs going out, and they weren't going out because they wouldn't have returned the DVDs to Netflix yet. A pretty good deal. By 2009, Netflix was shipping 900 million DVDs a year to more than 10 million subscribers, accounting for around 1.3% of all mail in the US. Its subscriber numbers peaked at 14 million in 2011, but Hastings had his eye on an even bigger prize. 4 years earlier, the company had taken advantage of advancements in technology to launch a groundbreaking subscription video on demand service, which could stream shows and movies to televisions via broadband internet. At the time, streaming movies directly to TVs still seemed like the stuff of science fiction. However, Hastings knew that would change, and Netflix would be able to make the most of it as it was the first to market. And he was right. In its early days, Netflix only had 1,000 films available for streaming compared to 70,000 on DVD. The technology was so far ahead of its time that it took years for widespread broadband adoption to catch up with Netflix. However, when it did, the popularity of its platform surged past its mail-order business, taking it to its current daily tally of 282 million subscribers. Traditional media companies did not see it coming. And it's strange they wouldn't have seen things coming, because even VHS rentals had a huge impact on the movie industry. It affected the studios greatly. Technology affects distribution. It always does. Even the creation of DVDs, which was a very similar model to what was happening with VHS rentals and sales, made it obvious that technology would affect distribution, and that distribution would affect the entertainment industry, all of the studios. But somehow they never really caught on to the potential of what Netflix caught on to. Michael Eisner, former CEO of Disney, in an interview for the Daily Mail said, well, Reed Hastings, who's a genius in this area, took selling DVDs by mail and said, well, our real name is Netflix. We want to stream them now. Nobody thought of that. Several companies had the ability to buy Netflix early for nothing. Netflix had some financial problems of their own over the years. Netflix was looking to get bought out by Blockbuster. Blockbuster is like, nah, we don't need to buy you. Well, they probably should have bought Netflix. They ended up regretting it, as over the past 5 years, Netflix has overtaken Disney to become the world's biggest media company by market capitalization with a value of over $295 billion. Content was a crucial component of its magic formula. As Michael Eisner said, Reed Hastings created a business strategy that was buying everybody's library. Everybody agreed to sell their library to him, which was probably a mistake for them, but they made a lot of money on it, and it kept a lot of companies afloat. And they licensed the library. They didn't quite buy them out, but that's what he means. In 2014, Disney got in on the action when it announced that it would spend $200 million over 3 years filming 4 Netflix series based on its Marvel superheroes characters Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Daredevil. This culminated in a team-up miniseries called The Defenders, but it didn't stop there, as a sequel series to Daredevil will debut next year. However, this time it will be exclusive to Disney+. The fascinating thing about that was that at the time, it seemed like a big deal. That was 2014, so it was 10 years ago, and there has been a lot of inflation lately. But that was $200 million for 60 episodes of TV. Today, Disney spends around $25 million per episode per Marvel show. You can do the math of 60 times $25 million and see that they're spending multiples of what they used to spend to make a show for Netflix. Netflix doesn't spend that money on a per episode basis unless they're making something like Stranger Things. The soaring number of Netflix subscribers wasn't the only reason that studios sat up and took notice of the streamer. It offered subscribers a more flexible way of consuming content than they previously got from the always-on cable TV channels. Instead of tuning into a schedule, Netflix subscribers could pick what they wanted to watch and when they wanted to watch it. They didn't even have to wait for the next weekly episode of their favorite shows, as they could stream them all in one go, causing consumers to coin the term binge watching. That's not all. Movies ushered in a whole new world for Netflix, as the platform could stream the movies direct to consumers without needing to give around 50% of the revenue to movie theaters, as studios typically have to do. Studios began to develop their own streaming platforms. Their efforts intensified during 2017 as the market value of Netflix surged a staggering 56% to $83.1 billion. On August 8, 2017, Disney announced that it would end its deal with Netflix and launch its own entertainment streaming platform. Then, just before the end of 2017, Disney's CEO Bob Iger followed up that bombshell by announcing a $71 billion deal to buy 20th Century Fox. The deal to acquire Fox gave Disney the movie rights to the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, as well as control of the streaming service Hulu and The Simpsons and Family Guy. This diversified Disney's content, making it appeal to a wider audience of potential streaming customers. As Iger revealed when he announced the deal, quote, "One of the most exciting aspects of our Fox acquisition is that it will allow us to greatly accelerate our direct-to-consumer strategy, enabling us to better serve customers around the world." 2 years later, at the Moffett-Nathanson conference, he reiterated this and added, quote, "The lens that we analyzed our Fox deal through was with an eye toward eventually launching the direct-to-consumer businesses. It was a costly way to do it, and this was only the beginning." During 2018, Netflix briefly took Disney's crown as the world's most valuable media company, so Disney stepped up its streaming plans. On November 8, 2018, Iger announced that the service would be named Disney Plus and that the company was aiming to launch in late 2019. Then came the news that investors had been dreading. Instead of making money from licensing content to Netflix, Disney announced in February 2019 that it would lose around $150 million of operating income that year from withholding content. The strategy is right. The strategy is clear. The management is right. The management is clear. The cost is the question. Netflix is spending billions and billions of dollars a year on content. Maybe 20 or something. Disney spent a lot of money on acquiring Fox. They're spending a lot of money on keeping their products off other streaming services. When Disney Plus finally launched in November 2019, the industry held its breath. In addition to the blockbuster bill from buying 20th Century Fox and the loss of operating income from ending the Netflix contract, Disney was also thrust into competition with its biggest clients. To tempt subscribers, Disney spent tens of billions of dollars on movies and TV shows which played exclusively on its platform rather than being screened in theaters or on TV. The Hollywood Reporter described Disney Plus as a risky bet for a company that most recently generated $6.7 billion in quarterly revenue from its legacy television business. It was absolutely right about the platform being risky, but ultimately this was not only because of its threatened TV revenue. Almost every major studio followed in the footsteps of Netflix by launching their own streaming platform. As Disney CEO Bob Iger said to The Hollywood Reporter, the risk would have been essentially maintaining a status quo approach to how we were managing our content. Well, there were risks on both sides. The question was, which risk was the right risk? But the problem was Netflix already had too much of an advantage by being the first mover and really paying attention to what customers were responding to. That's a major problem if you're not going to deal directly with consumers as part of the core of your company. You don't really understand what consumers actually really value and what they want. One of the USPs of Disney Plus is the depth of its library, which has more than 13,000 shows on it in 39 languages. The platform even seemed particularly well suited to Disney's hit Marvel franchise, which has an interconnected storyline spanning 47 movies and shows. Disney commissioned Marvel shows which could only be found on its platform, meaning that many fans would have to subscribe to fully follow the plot of its films, which include Avengers Endgame, the second highest grossing movie of all time. Of course, had Disney just stuck with producing content that people actually wanted to see instead of pushing a social agenda through their content, they would have had a different result. They probably would have still lost money because they were spending money like lunatics. but they would have kept the value of their brand and they would have gotten a lot more subscribers and a lot of people that would have excitedly talked about the cool stories going on in their shows. Instead, they got the opposite. Disney Plus initially seemed heaven sent as it launched just a few months before the world went into lockdown during the pandemic. Consumers soon craved new content and Disney Plus was there for them. Indeed, Disney Plus seemed to be such a sensation that Iger retired in 2020, safe in the knowledge that the platform would see the company through the pandemic while his successor Bob Chapek took over the reins. But it didn't work out as Iger expected. At a starting price of $6.99, subscriptions sold like hotcakes, and Disney Plus had 10 million signups on its first day alone when it launched in November 2019. It far outstripped projections of 14.3 million by the end of the year, and the trend continued in that direction. Disney Plus attracted 60 million subscribers after 8 months and 100 million after 16 months, which was more than Disney initially forecast to have within 5 years. Investors were impressed, and Disney's stock price rose in line with the rise in its subscriber numbers, peaking at $201.91 in March 2021. To capitalize on this, Disney spent more money on more movies and more TV shows, which could only be found on Disney Plus, in a bid to dethrone Netflix as the world's most popular streaming platform. Then came a disturbance in the force. The content began coming on stream as the pandemic began receding. As people emerged from the lockdown, they had less time to watch streaming shows and canceled their subscriptions. It led to Disney Plus subscriber numbers falling from a high of 164 million in 2022 to 153 million in the third quarter of this year, 45% less than Netflix. At the same time, the operating costs of Disney Plus surged due to the content spending. Disney spent around $550 million just on Marvel's Moon Knight, Secret Invasion, and Loki Season 2 streaming shows. And that's why Disney's direct-to-consumer division generated blockbuster losses. This perfect storm was magnified for Disney's flagship Marvel franchise. The interconnected storylines, which were previously one of its biggest strengths, suddenly became one of its biggest weaknesses. This was because it could make fans who missed one of the shows more reluctant to watch the next for fear they wouldn't understand it. This led Disney to have to put disclaimers at the start of some of its shows saying that prior knowledge was not required, but of course, by that time, it was not necessary. Marvel was fighting a losing battle. They also went so aggressive pushing Marvel's She-Hulk and Ms. Marvel, things that people just did not want to see, to push their ideological agenda, and refused to accept feedback from fans that this is not what they wanted to see. Marvel's connective tissue was far from the only problem. Disney Plus isn't just home to the studio's extensive back catalog, but also its new releases, which usually appear on the platform a matter of months after they play in theaters. It's just what Disney needed when the theaters were shut down during the pandemic, but wasn't appealing for the studio when they reopened. If a family of 4 go to see a movie at the theater and like it so much that they return, they need to buy a total of 8 tickets. According to AMC, which has the largest share of the US theater market, the average ticket price last year was $11.23, which generates total revenue of $89 from that one family watching that one movie. Disney gets around 50% of that, giving it $45. However, if that same family is prepared to wait a few months for that movie to hit Disney Plus, it will cost them just $9.99 for a month, which is the minimum subscription period. Not only was the price even cheaper at $6.99 when Disney Plus launched, but subscribers could even share their password with anyone they wanted. Disney made it as appealing and easy as possible for people to watch movies and shows from the comfort of their own homes. It even released some films exclusively on Disney Plus at no extra cost, even though they were originally meant to be shown in theaters. One was Artemis Ford, Kenneth Branagh's 2020 adventure movie about a 12-year-old criminal mastermind, which was intended to become a franchise but ended up being a one-off. Unsurprisingly, Disney Plus didn't go down well with theaters when they reopened. Disney's first major release after theaters reopened was its Marvel movie Black Widow, which had been delayed by more than a year due to the pandemic. When the movie finally came out in July 2021, Disney made the controversial decision to release it simultaneously in theaters and on Disney Plus, where subscribers could access it for a month at an additional charge of $29.99. The National Association of Theater Owners blasted this price package, known as Premier Access, and blamed it for a 67% fall in box office receipts in the movie's second weekend. It also infuriated Scarlett Johansson because it affected her back-end deal with the studio. Big stars will get revenue splits based on how well a movie does in movie theaters. Well, if you're going to siphon off some of the revenue and collect it direct to consumer, that is going to affect the movie theater revenue, which is going to affect her money particularly, but it also affects her entire career because if it's a box office bomb, that attaches to the star, it attaches to the movie, to the franchise, to everyone involved with the project. Ultimately, Scarlett Johansson sued Disney, with sources telling the Wall Street Journal she'd lost more than $50 million because of Disney's release strategy. Eventually, she settled her lawsuit with Disney, and she recently commented in an interview with the New York Times saying that, quote, "I think it was just poor judgment and poor leadership at that time. It just felt very unprofessional to me, the entire ordeal. And honestly, I was incredibly disappointed, especially because I was the one holding out hope until finally my team was like, you have to act." The dispute exposed the damage that streaming could do as it competes directly with movie theaters. It also explains why actor Seth Rogen told Variety in May last year that he was personally distressed by not having any sense of how successful these shows and movies we make are for streaming services. The streaming losses combined with the strategy of chasing subscriber numbers contributed to Disney's stock price collapsing. It's around 50% of where it was at in March 2021. Bob Iger unexpectedly returned to Disney as CEO to replace Bob Chapek in November of 2022, and only after a few months he introduced a cost-cutting plan which led to more than 7,000 job losses and $7.5 billion in savings. The number of Marvel shows in development was cut, a ban on password sharing was introduced, and an advertising-supported Disney Plus tier was launched to boost revenues and open the door to individual shows directly generating revenue. Coming full circle, Iger pulled more than 50 titles from Disney Plus so they could generate revenue by being licensed to other platforms. Other studios made the same move, which was a return to the pre-streaming days when they licensed content to Netflix. The impact of Disney's failure with streaming was seen in Disney's third quarter 2023 filings, which revealed the company recorded charges of $2.4 billion related to the removal of content from the direct-to-consumer services. This wasn't because they licensed the shows to other platforms. This was because the shows were so poorly received, they were a complete and total waste of money, and Disney wanted to play some games with their finances. So by saying that $2.4 billion worth of this content is not worth it anymore, it's a failure, we don't want to have this show or this movie on our streaming service, it allowed Disney to reflect lower costs of operating on a regular basis by saying it was a one-time charge for failed entertainment productions. Disney Plus recently began launching what it calls streams, continuously playing content themed to its franchises and characters. And this I like. It simulates cable channels. I like it because it's logical. People are used to sometimes having a cable channel on in the background all day long. Why wouldn't you do that with streaming? Otherwise, you have to go and pick out shows on a consistent basis and say, oh no, now I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do that. You know what? Maybe you just have it playing on in the background. Why not have a stream of something that you are familiar with, that you like, just on in the background? This move too has been made by other studios like Comcast, which has 24/7 sports on its Peacock streaming service. It is a return to the days of the always-on cable channels that Disney Plus replaced. It comes amidst reports that viewers are getting tired of choosing from thousands of options on an array of streaming services. Instead, many are looking for programs to play in the background when they're at home, just like they did with cable TV. Movies are different. Quote, people have become conditioned to expect that things will quickly appear on Disney Plus, according to Neil Macker, a senior equity analyst for Morningstar Research Services. The same applies to the titles on other streaming platforms, and it explains why the 2023 global box office of $33.9 billion was down 15% on the average of the 3 pre-pandemic years from 2017 to 2019, according to analysts. This is despite Iger performing another about-face, returning to the model of new releases in theaters with a solid window of exclusivity to protect the lucrative revenue stream that they generate. Again, other studios made the same move, and the timing was terrible as it came just before historic strikes which gripped Hollywood for more than 6 months last year. One of the common concerns on the strikes was residual payments, royalties paid to actors and writers for reruns of the films and TV shows they work on, as well as other airings of the TV shows and films after the initial release. Actors and writers are typically paid each time a show runs on network or cable TV, and they also receive residuals when someone buys a Blu-ray disc or DVD, just as they did when VHS tapes were sold. However, the advent of streaming cast a dark spell on this structure, as subscribers usually pay a monthly or annual fee to get access to a studio's entire library, rather than paying a one-time fee for each production. This led to a crash in residual payments to actors and writers, which set the stage for these strikes. The addiction to streaming had finally brought the curtain down on Hollywood, as production pipelines soon dried up during the shutdown, leading to massive losses across the entire film industry, from studios down to special effects firms. The resolution to the strikes had the studios paying an additional revenue stream from their streaming revenues as part of an increased pay package. That added to the cost of their making content, which was already very high. In January, Variety forecast that the top 10 studios would spend a combined $120 billion on entertainment content this year, putting the total loss during the 6 months of the strikes at approximately $60 billion. Taking that amount of money out of the ecosystem in Hollywood caused chaos for cash flow across the industry, and Hollywood is still reeling from it. Disney's direct-to-consumer division finally made its first profit in the latest quarter, but only when its sports streamer ESPN Plus is included. Without it, the result was a $19 million loss. In total, Disney's direct-to-consumer division has accrued an $11.4 billion loss since they launched Disney Plus. Given that streaming subscriptions have declined from their peak and theater admissions are still far from their pre-pandemic peak, the multi-billion-dollar question is, how are many consumers actually watching content now? The answer might be illegally. A report from Bloomberg revealed that usage of pirate sites has soared since 2020 to more than 140 billion visits from about 105 billion visits prior to the pandemic, according to estimates from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And it's too late to fix that problem. Once the studio's back catalogs hit the internet, they can instantly be copied and made available to pirates all over the world. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.